Hey guys, hanging out with Harris the Third. Harris, you're an illusionist. Bringing on is it magic or illusion? What's the difference?
Depends on who's asking and what the circle that I'm in is. Yeah, I mean, I spend a good majority of my time outside the church, but grew up in church. Later in life, returned back to the church. There's another whole story there.
Yeah,
Passionate about the church. I'll plan a church.
yeah.
But depending on what church world I'm in, I stick with illusionist. Because when I say that, there's still a few people who get weirded out by it.
Yeah, that's good. Tell me a little bit of your story. Teenage years, you had some things happen into your early 20s, and that really shaped you, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we go back all the way to the age of 9, I was growing up in a small town in Southeast Tennessee. My parents had minimum wage jobs. It's kind of the quintessential poor kid in a small rural town in the middle of nowhere. And then I got a box of magic tricks for Christmas from my grandmother. Yeah, like we called it a little magic kit. And that box of tricks changed my life. And so I started traveling a lot as a teenager. I still remember being like 14 years old and my parents sitting down at tax time at our little kitchen table. And they were trying to explain to me that I had made more money that year than they had ever made in 2 years combined. It was like over 6 figures, and we were like, what is happening? This is nuts. So started doing cruises when I was like 16 and corporate events and events at mega churches. And by the time I was 21, I made $1 million doing magic shows. Went bankrupt by 22. Yeah. And that is what served as the catalyst for me to try to get serious about what life is all about. I started asking deeper questions about faith and philosophy and like, what's the meaning of life? That was my first existential crisis. Yeah, that was kind of the springboard for.
Were you a believer at an early age, or was that your?
It's a great question. Yeah, no one's asked me that in a long time. I believe I was a believer. I grew up in a pretty conservative, like Southern Baptist environment, where you can't lose your salvation.
Right.
So if that's the case, then I think when I was 6 years old and walked down front, I remember, praying the sinner's prayer, believing it. I remember having a conversation with our pastor before getting baptized around making sure that I understood the gospel. And I don't know that I was necessarily living out the gospel intentionally, maybe a little bit of like accidental living out the gospel because I was a new creature, right? As I look back, and one of the reasons I think I was, is I look at that season, especially between like 16 and 21. I mean, I had access to so much money. I was traveling some places by myself. When you're on a cruise ship by yourself.
Your parents let you?
Yeah. I mean, my grandfather retired early to tour with me when I was a kid before I could start driving.
Okay.
But he didn't fly places with me. He didn't go on cruises with me. And I mean, I have memories of being on, hotel elevators and them they're like flight attendants going up because we all came on the shuttle from the airport or whatever. And they're like, hey, what room are you in? And from that to drugs, so many opportunities where I was invited into things.
Right.
And I just remember for whatever reason, like I was never really interested in that. And so as I look back, I see this just evidence of God through his spirit kind of protecting me from jacking my life up, for lack of a better word. So I would say, yes, I think I was. I just don't think I was truly following Jesus obediently and faithfully.
So you went to Nashville. I want to get the story right. Was 21 when you went to Nashville, and you basically blew all your...
I went to Nashville and wasted $1 million. And it doesn't take much. And I didn't waste it on a house. I wasted it on clothes and eating out and furniture, big screen TVs, cars. Big screen TVs were a lot more expensive back then. You could spend $4,000 or $5,000 on I remember when plasmas first came out.
Yeah.
I was at the Mall of America in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I walked by the Bose store. Remember when Bose used to do these like factory experiences? And there was a plasma on the wall, and like people were outside the window, like, what is that? And it was $26,000.
And you were like,
I was like, I got to get one of those. Yeah.
Wow. So what was the experience after that? So you turned 22. What was the kind of rock bottom moment for you?
Yeah, rock bottom was not being able to pay my bills. I mean, I stacked up so much debt and financed so many things. It's not like I stopped making money. It's just it wasn't enough when you're just reaching for the illusion of more. And I was so busy keeping up with the Joneses and trying to control the perceptions of other people. As I said tonight from the platform, when you live for the approval of others, you'll end up dying by their rejection.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of had this addiction to approval of like, what do I need to do to get people to like me? And that would be driving the right car, wearing the right clothes, hanging out with the right celebrity in the right part of town, living in the right house. And so wasted $1 million and then some and couldn't keep up with my bills. So we sold everything we had. We were married out of our company. Got married young at 21. So I got married and moved to Nashville in the same month.
And then lost it all.
I lost it all. And then it wasn't like this immediate like oh, I see the light. It was this experience of, man, how did this happen? And you're like
Mm.
going to bed at night asking these deep questions about what life is about. And the first epiphany was, it's interesting when you literally are a professional at tricking people and you go, how did I get tricked into believing all this stuff? Hang on a second. How did I get tricked into believing all this stuff?
Huh.
Wait, do I get tricked into believing lies the same way that magicians trick people on stage? And I started connecting these dots between how deception works and how all influence and persuasion works. And so I realized the principles of deception were universal. That kind of led me a little bit angry because I realized, oh, I don't even think I realized what I knew. This whole time I had like the secrets of deception and I couldn't even see that I was deceiving myself and that other people were deceiving me. And then when I started researching, I'm like, the average American takes in 4 to 5,000 messages and ads a day. That was the stat back then in 2005, 2006, 2007. It's got to be higher now, maybe 10,000 a day.
Yeah.
And most of it is saying, hey, buy this, drive this, wear this, it'll give you life. But that life that it gives us isn't full life. It's not real life. It's like a mirage and an illusion. So that epiphany led to what eventually led to, I got to get serious about following Jesus and figure out what he's actually calling me to.
Mm. So you mentioned that we see so many ads in a day. I'm going to take a weird turn here. We'll see where we
Sure.
go. Okay.
Yeah.
So at Church Visuals, we help people, churches and ministries with their visual media. So that's graphics and video. But you are in the business of maybe letting them see or see something different
Sure.
than you want them to see.
Sure.
So let's kind of take a rabbit trail here into how visuals really do matter.
Okay. I mean, where I would start is that it's storytelling, right? Like story is the operating system of the human brain. The stories that, like, we walk around all day long telling ourselves stories to make sense of the world, to understand what other people are saying to us. If you talk to me in story, it comes with a lower cognitive load. If you give me a spreadsheet without an explanation, that has a high cognitive load. Now, those numbers in your mind may not tell a story, but the only way for me to make sense and understand the numbers in that spreadsheet is to try to deduct what the story is. So the stories that we're told and the stories we tell ourselves, they form narratives. Narrative is what drives all human behavior. So I would start with an understanding that everything is story, which means that color is story. Like, we could just put the mics down and just sit in this room and look around, and based on the design, the architect that designed the space, eventually we would start to tell ourselves a story that it might make us feel a certain way. So I would start with going, visuals are simply one component of storytelling. It's a part of the story. Put a pin in that for a second and go, okay, the other thing you have to understand about visuals, especially visuals in the context of a magic show, is that there's no difference between what we might consider a con man and a great leader, with the exception of their motive. The principles of deception that a magician uses are the same principles of psychology and persuasion and influence that everything from a marketer or salesperson to a leader or a pastor would use, which means we're using all the different mediums of storytelling to try to combine together to tell a more compelling story. So visuals are incredibly powerful because we're very visual creatures. But visuals are simply one component of the story that's being told. So when it comes to visuals, specifically church visuals, I would go, what's the story we're trying to tell just through these visuals alone? What story are these visuals also supporting? And then what is the pre-existing story that exists in the mind of the heart of the person we're trying to tell this story to? Because sometimes we have to go erase a dry erase board before we put a new idea on it because there's not enough space. And sometimes the human brain works in the same way. And so because we're all walking around with these complex narratives, if I invite you into a new story that conflicts with the narrative that you've already adopted as true, your brain sort of throws up a guard and is like, I already have a story, I'm sticking to that one. But if I can create an experience of awe and wonder in positive awe states, what researchers at UC Berkeley are teaching us is that it makes our brain more curious. We kind of open up to the stories that we're being invited into, and we're like, okay. And we take people on a journey of belief, which is what storytelling does. It invokes a sense of wonder. Then we get curious. Curiosity is wonder in action. As we get more curious, the storytelling unfolds. We go on this journey of belief, and eventually what we believe ends up reinforming what we see, which is one of the things that we talked about on our walk out.
Yeah.
The difference between seeing as believing versus believing as seeing.
Yeah. So let's get into a modern church leader, a pastor, a communicator. How can they be better Give me practical. How can they be a better visual storyteller?
Yeah, well, I would go back to one of the things I just said, which is everything is visual storytelling, and
Mm,
no knock on what you guys are doing, but even though it's called, visuals, everything is visual, which
yeah,
means there may not be any graphics or media involved in the parking lot,
right.
but when someone drives into a
Yep,
parking lot and they see someone waving at them or giving them a thumbs up or a smile, or
yep,
that person isn't confused about where they're supposed to go because their first time ever choosing the courage necessary to pull into a church parking lot,
right.
that's a moment of visual storytelling.
Yep,
And so everything is visual storytelling, which means when we get to the part of the visual media, we have to make sure that all of that is supporting the overall narrative that is unfolding throughout that entire person's journey and experience with us. And we do all that, again, with an understanding of the pre-existing narrative that they are probably bringing into that environment where we're trying to tell a new story. I know that's more complex to wrap your mind around than
yep,
just here's how to tell a good story,
right.
but that's the understanding of story and narrative that I think most people aren't focused on today. We're talking about stories with a far too simplistic approach and lens. And we should, anytime we're talking about storytelling, we should also be having a conversation about narrative and narrative intelligence and narrative influence, because that's how you move from storytelling and once upon a time to story making, which is what we're all in the business of as church leaders. Is we don't want to just tell stories. We want to change the stories that people tell themselves about who they are, who God is, and who he created them to be.
Yeah, good. Um, I was in your talk just a few minutes ago, and you showed a clip of a guy very excited about a double rainbow, and just his excitement. And I don't think that that story would have been as impactful if you just told it.
Sure.
You showing that clip really brought it
Yeah.
to life.
Yeah.
So I guess should we show more than we tell?
Yes, I think we should do both.
Yep.
And it doesn't always have to be an equal 50-50 ratio, right? There's a reason why, maybe this sounds arrogant, I don't know, but I don't think when people leave here after this session, they will go, man, that guy was an amazing magician. I think they will leave going, yeah, the tricks were cool, but man, the story he told and the message and the ideas that he shared,
Right.
that's going to stick with me for a long time.
Right.
Now, even though they're not going to leave here thinking about all the magic tricks, they're going to leave here thinking about the story I told and the message I shared.
Yep.
That story would not have meant as much without the magic tricks, because there were these beautiful visuals and object lessons for the story that I was trying to bring to life. So I think it's
Yep.
both.
Yeah, good. All right, so let's leave folks with an encouragement. Maybe we're repeating ourselves here, but how can a ministry leader either be a better storyteller, or what are some maybe just some practical things that they could go back this week over the next few weeks
Yeah.
and really lean into storytelling?
Well, first of all, I'd have to say, come to Story Conference. There's a reason why we get people in a room every year and talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's cool to have church leaders from everything from North Point and Saddleback to conferences like
And
Will,
you have all kinds of companies there as well.
alongside of Apple, Google, Disney, Nike, Amazon, like
Yeah.
Meta, almost all of the Fortune 100 companies send creative leaders to Story Conference, so we can have conversations about this. And if you come there, and even if you don't, where it would take you is, I would say, focus on developing your narrative intelligence. I know that sounds like a weird word, but in a world that is probably going to be increasingly dominated by artificial intelligence, narrative intelligence is how we successfully reach people in the future. Narrative intelligence sounds like a fancy word, but it's simply us growing and increasing awareness of the stories we're telling ourselves, the stories we're telling others. And just like emotional intelligence gives you more agency over influencing someone else because you understand what they're feeling and how to tap into those emotions, narrative intelligence also gives you more agency as a communicator, as a storyteller, to shift narratives, to heal narratives, and to ultimately change the stories that people are telling that are rooted in those narratives. So grow in narrative intelligence. There's so many ways that we can do that.
How can folks learn more about you and the Story Conference?
Yeah, I would say go over to Astoria.com. It's Astoria with an I. That's my company. Istoria.com. Astoria is just ancient Greek for the word story, because everything we do is story and everything is story.
And story.com was probably taken.
It's, believe it or not, it's actually available right now. That's a minimum offer of $1 million. And so I've not made that investment yet because I lost it when I was 21. But Astoria.com. My personal site is harristhethird.com, which is just harrisii.com.
Yeah. Great, man. Thanks for the time. Really appreciate it.
Man, thank you for what you're doing. This is important. This probably goes without saying, but as a magician, I'm in the visual business. And so it's cool to sit down with a kindred spirit.
Yeah.
Feels like a co-collaborator. So thanks for what you guys are doing.
Thanks, man. This has been a podcast presentation of Church Visuals. Executive produced by Carl Barnhill. Edited by Mario Franco. Title and show graphics by Angie Lomas. For more resources to help you visually communicate the gospel, visit churchvisuals.com.